Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stones.
Am I going to get sued?
You got legal on this?
Let's send you out on the right note. PFF sucks. Have a great day, everybody.
It's always nice when a little bit of breaking NFL news happens deep into the offseason, May the 30th, when we're busy talking NFL rankings, player rankings, position rankings, all those kinds of things. And then boom, the Miami Dolphins drop a bomb on the NFL and sign Jaylen Waddle to a huge extension, a 3-year extension that gives him, $75 million in guaranteed money, and makes him one of the top paid NFL wide receivers out there. So myself, Trevor Sikkema, we're going to talk about all that and then get into our planned rankings. How's it going, Trev?
It's going good. This news obviously dropping right before the show begins gives us plenty of things to think about because the two of us just frantically Googling things like contract numbers and stats because obviously the Jaylen Waddle deal is huge because now the Miami Dolphins are paying 2 wide receivers, top 5 wide receiver money in the league, but it also means a lot for 2 guys who have yet to sign their contract extensions in CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. And you and I were talking before the show. I said, holy cow, Justin Jefferson's about to sign a deal that averages like $35 million a year. And you said that number might actually start with a 4 at this point for what Justin Jefferson is. So holy cow, wide receiver contracts are going high.
Yeah, they are. And they should be. I mean, this is, they're the next position after quarterbacks in terms of where the data would say start allocating your resources. So it does make sense for those top wide receivers to be pushing that $40 million mark when quarterback contracts that used to be $40 million a year are now pushing $55, $60 million at the top of that market. It does make some sense. I genuinely think Justin Jefferson, at the minimum, his camp has got to be pushing this number starts with a 4. And it wouldn't shock me if he gets it, given where these deals have gone. A.J. Brown up there at $32 million a year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the deal that he just signed is at $30 million. That's where Tyreek Hill was when he started that contract. So you can sort of see the inflation at work with those deals. And Davante Adams, remember, for a few years, Davante Adams' contract was seen as this crazy outlier that nobody wanted to touch. I mean, He's now 5th in terms of average per year. He's now behind Waddle. Like, Waddle's extension just surpassed the Davante Adams contract that was seen as this crazy outlier that broke the wide receiver market for a few years.
Yeah, it's tough because, I mean, you and I were talking right before we hit record. Teams try to find some sort of negotiation leverage with their young stars, and they're kind of like, oh, well, we'll wait it out, we'll give it a little bit of time. But the fact of the matter is, the salary cap keeps going up so much, and wide receiver play is at such a high level, wide receiver value is at such a high level, and let's face it, wide receivers are often outside of quarterbacks, the fan favorites on the team. If you have a good wide receiver, fans love this player. So you have everything working against you. You have marketing, you have overall value, you have talent, you have everything working against you if you're a team. And it feels like these teams are we'll wait, we'll bring the deal to the very end, whatever. But the longer you wait, the more players are just going to set the market with their extensions around the league, and that's only going to make it worse for you. So I thought a mid-30s contract for Justin Jefferson for an average per year was crazy. And now, like you said, the Minnesota Vikings might be praying that it's only $35 million a year for Justin Jefferson at this point, which is nuts.
It makes it actually puts teams in this really difficult negotiating position, right? Where, because if let's say, okay, the Justin Jefferson deal, it's not a surprise, right? This has been on the horizon for a while. They knew they were going to have to get this deal done. Jamar Chase, similar thing. These are the contracts are coming almost immediately when you see how good that player is in the NFL and you start future planning for it. But so you can get these deals done years in advance, but at some point, like when Justin Jefferson's agent, and I'm not saying he did this, but when whoever's agent rocks up at the table, throws down the first offer and says, this is the number we're looking for, the sooner you get the deal done, the better it is financially for you, because every subsequent contract that is signed only pushes that number higher. We're seeing that now with Jefferson. For quarterbacks, you're seeing it with Dak Prescott as well. Like every contract that's signed until Dak signs only increases the number that he's looking for. So the faster you can get it signed, the better, which means that agent could just ask for the most ridiculous number he wants the first time around, right? I know where this is going. I want $40 million a year. And you're like, that's ridiculous. Get out of here. We're not even talking if that's your number. And then every deal that gets signed, the closer you get to that $40 million a year number, all you did was like drag it out until you end up in the same place anyway. You might as well just try and get them to what, like the best number you think you can get that guy to as fast as humanly possible, because every contract that's signed is going to get you in that spot anyway.
So I'm looking at it right now, and if these numbers are correct, the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL from a per year basis, so not total guarantees, that's a little bit different, but like a per year basis, is Nick Bosa. Bosa's getting, I think the average is $34 million a year. That's the 16th highest that we have in the NFL amongst all players, and everybody ahead of him is a quarterback. If Justin Jefferson gets to, let's just say like an even $40 million a year,
right,
he would be tied for 11th. He'd almost have a top 10 overall contract in the NFL, which would be crazy. But Minnesota's almost at a point where you can't not sign the guy.
Right.
So, like you said, you're kind of in a situation where you might be forced to meet his demands. And, Justin Jefferson has obviously had an unbelievable career up to this point. 1,400 yards to start his career as a rookie, 1,600 the year after that, 1,800 the year after that. And he didn't play a bunch last year. He only played only started in 9 games. So he eclipsed 1,000 yards, but it was just over 1,000 yards. And I go, wow, like Justin Jefferson, obviously those are incredible numbers. Dude, CeeDee Lamb's numbers are also nuts. He only had 935 yards his rookie season, but I think he missed 2 games. So that goes into it. 1,100 yards the year after, 1,350 yards the year after, and then 1,750 last year. So it's like CeeDee Lamb is almost at the point where he's going to tell the Cowboys, like, yeah, 35 mil a year minimum is like where we're starting this conversation. He's probably going to shoot for 40 million. Justin Jefferson's not the only player who's actively having these contract talks. I think that CeeDee Lamb is putting himself in that exact same camp to threaten that like $40 million a year number for a wide receiver, which is, holy cow, if either of them get close to that, that's going to be what that is going to do to the market moving forward.
Right.
Thinking about the wide receivers that just came into the league, the Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, the Malik Neighbors, the Rome Odunze's, like if these guys are as good as we think they are, 2-3 years down the line, they're going to be pointing at whatever contract CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson signed, and they're going to be like, yeah, that's me. And so to think that a wide receiver could touch 35 or above million per year, and then to think if one of them does it, many behind them could also achieve that. Now we're talking about a total reshaping of the pie that is the total salary cap in the NFL.
And at least for Minnesota, they got away from Kirk Cousins' contract. They're now on a veteran or a rookie quarterback deal with J.J. McCarthy and, $10 million for Sam Darnold. But they have a relatively cheap quarterback situation for the next few years to go along with whatever contract they hand Justin Jefferson. Dak Prescott is trying to get Dallas is trying to get CeeDee Lamb signed at the same time when Dak Prescott's negotiating for a deal that starts with a 6 per year. Like, yeah. I want $60 million a year. And by the way, my number one target wants $35-40 million a year. Like, Dallas is looking at a situation where they've got $100 million potentially tied up in two players. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. And 2 players who it's like you had them play unbelievably well this past year. You have a reoccurring perennial defensive player of the year candidate on the other side, and yet you couldn't even win your first playoff game at home. Like, that's when it starts to get really tough to stomach. Is you look at what Dallas was last year, and were they a perfect team? No, but they had Micah Parsons, who outside of Myles Garrett just being an alien, could have easily won Defensive Player of the Year. You had CeeDee Lamb as one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and you had Dak Prescott, who outside of Lamar Jackson, Dak could have been right there for MVP. And it amounted to you losing at home in a playoff game. That's when all of that money, in my opinion, starts to become, you're now having a conversation of whether or not that kind of stuff is worth it.
Right. Just before we move off this and to the main topic of today, just to show you the inflationary price or the inflationary power of how quickly you get the deal done, Devontae Smith and Jaylen Waddle are two really interesting comps because they were in the same draft class, drafted very close together. They were sort of debate at draft time, which guy would you prefer? In the NFL so far, Devontae Smith has 240 catches for 3,178 yards and 19 receiving touchdowns. Waddle has 11 more catches, so 251 for 3,385 yards, so about 200 more yards, and 18 receiving touchdowns, one fewer. And yet the money that Jaylen Waddle has extended for, and what is effectively the same kind of deal, a 3-year extension on top of the back end of the rookie contracts, is significantly more. Like by waiting, Devontae Smith's deal ended up for Philadelphia being way cheaper than the deal Miami had to stump up for Jaylen Waddle. So the quicker you get these signed, the better. And obviously that's easier said than done because you're negotiating against somebody. But man, if you wait just because you're concerned about, well, maybe we don't want to give the guy the deal right away, the longer you wait, the more expensive it's getting. Anyway, before we get into the main rankings part of the show, as parents, we all want our kids to grow up and be happy, successful, and financially independent. With a UGMA account from Fabric by Gerber Life, you're arming your child with a powerful financial tool to help shape their journey towards financial success. It's all online, and setting up an account could take you just 5 minutes with as little as $1 a day. Then you can manage your child's UGMA account and monitor their investments right from your phone. There's no contribution limits, multiple tax advantages, and they're SIPC insured up to $500,000. Plus, no commission fees and just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, Trev. It's ranking season, both at PFF and in the NFL, and generally it's all anybody is talking about. We got a bunch of articles up on PFF.com ranking various different positions, and I want to start with a few of ours. So which ones of these did you do? You did the quarterback one, right?
I did quarterbacks.
All right, well, let's start there since then we can, because your ranking is presumably your ranking. So the top 10 at PFF had Patrick Mahomes number 1, Lamar Jackson number 2, Joe Burrow number 3, Josh Allen number 4, Justin Herbert number 5, Dak Prescott 6, Matt Stafford 7, Aaron Rodgers 8, Jalen Hurts 9, CJ Stroud number 10. So your 5 is as it is there. I would tell you my top 5 is pretty much the same, but slightly different. Patrick Mahomes number 1. I think that's everybody's unquestioned number 1 at this point. I had Josh Allen number 2. I understand the Lamar Jackson argument. I have him number 3. I just think Josh Allen, the capability of what he can do is still right up there with the most freaky quarterbacks in the NFL. When he's on, like the best version of Josh Allen, in my opinion, is unstoppable in a way that I don't know is necessarily true with Lamar, with Joe Burrow, even with the next guys. Lamar's my number 3. MVP, second one. He's incredible. Joe Burrow, number 4. And then I have Aaron Rodgers, number 5. I get Rodgers, who knows what to do with him, right? 40 years old, coming off an Achilles injury. But we are not that far removed from Rodgers being back-to-back MVPs. It's a great situation for him. If he's healthy, and he's shown no signs of other than an Achilles snapping in half after 4 snaps. He's shown no physical signs of decline. His arm still looks perfect. He still looks like he's able to run around, make all the plays. So, if Rodgers is able to come back healthy, I think he's still a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah. Look, it's hard to push too far back on the Rodgers thing. I still have him top 10. I have him number 8 on the list for the reasons that you mentioned. And I think that people think about Rodgers as a thing of the past, and you shouldn't. Like you said, he won back-to-back MVPs. He was 2020 and then 2021 as well. So outside of the Achilles year in 2023, there's not much time removed from him playing at a back-to-back MVP level. So I still think he's a top 10 quarterback. But there is some ascension that I think with the other guys that are ahead of him that I had to recognize. And it was kind of the same thing with Lamar, right? I mean, if we go up to the very top, you're right, Mahomes to me is in a tier of his own. In reality, any of those top quarterbacks can beat anybody, but Mahomes has gotten the edge so many times. You got to put him at number 1. I ended up giving it to Lamar at number 2 because, well, I think giving is the wrong word. He earned it, right? He's now a 2-time MVP. What he was able to do last season, he looked unstoppable. I mean, he added a little bit of extra weight. He was a little bit more durable. I think that he is still a phenomenal athlete with his legs, but he's smarter with how he uses his legs and his rushing ability. He's not putting himself in harm's way. He's still a fantastic passer, especially when it comes to deep ball stuff. I think that he was processing things underneath, short and intermediate, better last year than he ever has. And I think because of it, you saw the Ravens look damn near unstoppable until, of course, they faced Mahomes in the playoffs. So that's why in a category where I put Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen all in the same tier, I feel like I had to give it to Lamar because he has earned that number 2 spot. But in reality, you could certainly make a case for any of those guys. I just love the assassin that Joe Burrow is between the ears. I love the way that he processes the game, the pinpoint accuracy. It's just the man makes magic happen from the pocket. And I just think that what he has done over the last couple of years when he has been fully healthy has been tough to match. The same thing can be said from a talent standpoint with Josh Allen, but those guys are all in the same bucket. I mean, I can sit here and talk about how great they are individually, but ultimately it was a numerical list, and that's how I kind of came up with it. But then the guys that were separating them from your 5th guy and Rodgers is I have Justin Herbert at number 5. I think that Herbert's an unbelievable talent. I think that the arm is certainly there. I think that the receiving core was terrible last year. The offensive line wasn't good last year. The running back room was not efficient last year. And I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy, but I'm saying, okay, maybe not this upcoming year, but genuinely, year 2, year 3 of Jim Harbaugh, we're going to be, I think that it's going to be unquestioned that Justin Herbert's going to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And you're going to run out of excuses for reasons to think otherwise. So Dak's number 6, because I mentioned earlier in the show, he was my runner-up MVP. If you weren't giving it to Lamar Jackson, you were giving it to Dak. Unbelievable season last year. Second in big-time throws in the regular season. I think he was number 1 in turnover-worthy plays. His play rate under pressure was unbelievable last year. Just the awareness, the veteran savvy from him while still having the great physical ability with his arms and with his legs a little bit. It was all there for Prescott last year. And it is. I write this in the article. It's a damn shame that playoff game, he was as bad as he was, because they didn't just lose. Like, he was terrible in that game. And it sucks because he had 17 games where he was absolutely fantastic. And then in the game that's supposed to matter the most, it was one of the worst games of Prescott's career, especially that first half of that game. So what he did in the regular season, it was hard for me to put him any further than 6 just because it was phenomenal. There's a bigger sample size for it. But that's ultimately kind of how I came up with the rankings that I have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a year ago we had the same conversation, and the kind of agreed upon tier was Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen as the top 3. And we had the same conversation, like, does Mahomes belong in his own tier of 1, or can you put those 3 guys in the same group? And then Lamar Jackson, with that second MVP season, forced himself. Now it's, I think, a tier of 4, and you have the same conversation. Mahomes probably in a tier of his own at number 1, and then Lamar, Burrow, and Allen are the next 3 guys that you debate. And then you have this Justin Herbert situation where you're right. Like, I think it's been fairly unquestioned for a while that Herbert certainly has the talent to be in that same top 5, but every year we seem to have a new couple of excuses for why he hasn't necessarily played at that level, right? We had the broken rib cartilage that he battled through for a whole season. We got receivers that didn't help him out. We got, various offensive schemes that have chopped and changed. And it's like, is that going to be who he is for his entire career? You're sort of every year you find a reason that he didn't quite tap into the full potential, or he's just had this unlucky, relatively unlucky run at the start of his career, where every year there's been something, and then eventually, as you say, like maybe year 2 of Harbaugh, it all comes together, and that's when Justin Herbert catapults himself firmly to the top of this list, along with that elite sort of trio or 4 that we're talking about.
That's where I think we're headed, genuinely, because I feel like we've already seen signs of that from Herbert, and I think a lot of people like to point to the lack of team success, and it's just like the game of football is a team game. Yeah, quarterback means the most, but Justin Herbert's played really, really well. So I don't know, man. I just get so sick of the Herbert debates of what does he want? Shut up. You have to look at the whole situation of things. Look at what Herbert's been able to do. The perfection is not the bar. And I'm so sick of that when you're judging quarterbacks of I can point to you areas where he wasn't perfect. Duh, you could do that with everybody. But it's a team game. So a lot of time, team success, yeah, it matters for quarterback discussions, but we talk about it at like it's the be all end all, and it's just it's not. So I think that Herbert is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL. His numbers reflect that. His efficiency, it reflects that. And I think that even when his team has let him down, to me, Herbert continually elevates the entire group around him. There's only so much that you can do when you have certain situations that aren't up to par. But to me, the reason why I recognize him at number 5 on this list is because Herbert elevates so well. And he has done that already multiple times in multiple years throughout his career. So you've got a little bit of longevity with it. And I really do think that Harbaugh is the right guy for that organization. He's the right guy for Justin Herbert. And again, maybe not this year, his first year, but year 2, year 3 of Jim Harbaugh, I think we're talking about the Chargers as a future powerhouse, and I think we're talking about Herbert as an easy top 5 quarterback in the league.
All right, let's jump to wide receiver with the news today that Jaylen Waddle has signed that big extension. Wide receiver was rankings that I wrote, so my rankings are going to be the same as the PFF rankings. The top 10 in the PFF rankings. Number 1, Justin Jefferson. Number 2, Tyreek Hill. Number 3, Jamar Chase. Number 4, CeeDee Lamb. Number 5, A.J. Brown. 6, Devontae Adams. 7, Amon-Ra St. Brown. 8, Brandon Ayuk. 9, Cooper Kupp. And 10, Deebo Samuel. So our top 5s are actually quite similar looking at yours, but maybe we can extend that a bit beyond, because it's honestly beyond the top 5 where I think the wide receiver rankings get really interesting. But where does your top 5 differ from the official PFF rankings / my rankings?
The only real spot where I differ from the PFF rankings is I have Devontae Adams 4, and I'm not ready to take Devontae Adams out of a top 5 list in the NFL. I think I might have done the wide receiver ranking last year, and it was basically Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, tier 1, pick any of them. It doesn't matter. The answer is correct. Whoever you want to have at number 1. If you're building a franchise, it's probably different. You're taking Justin Jefferson because he's younger. If you need one guy for one game, yeah, it's probably Tyreek Hill. If you need one drive, maybe it's Devontae Adams. Whatever it is, however you want to contextualize those guys, they were in tier 1. But so I got to respect what Jamar Chase was even able to do this past year without a healthy Joe Burrow. So he is in that conversation as well. And then what CeeDee Lamb did last year, it's just the overall production. Sure, people can point to it and be like, well, he wins from the slot. It's way easier to win from the slot. Well, he's still winning at an unreal level. It's not like teams are fooled by the fact that, oh my gosh, they put CeeDee Lamb in the slot. No, they knew this was coming. They still just can't cover him. So you got to give him all the credit in the world there. I think he's an unbelievable talent at wide receiver who can not just play the slot, but also play on the outside as well. So his most productive year, double-digit touchdowns, over 1,700 yards. I think it was 135 catches or something crazy. So Lamb, I think, is starting to creep into that conversation. But to me, I think that tier 1 is probably you're just throwing Chase into that group as well, where it's Justin Jefferson, it's Tyreek Hill, it's Jamar Chase, it's Devontae Adams, who week in and week out can look completely unguardable no matter who you're going up against. And then I think tier 2, you start to get into, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, those guys start to kind of dominate that tier 2 of wide receivers, in my opinion.
Every time I do this, I come down the same way, and I have Justin Jefferson 1, Tyreek Hill number 2, and I always second guess it after the fact. I kind of wonder, Tyreek Hill is the one guy in the NFL that would terrify you the most if you're a defense, I think. As good as Justin Jefferson is, and he's good at everything, obviously he's a terrifying prospect to have to stop. But
Right.
Tyreek Hill is the guy where any snap you switch off for a millisecond, blip, touchdown. He has that ability, like early career Randy Moss, right? Where if you didn't assign 3 different guys to him and roll coverage in that direction, and if you switched off for a half second, it was like a touchdown immediately. Tyreek Hill has that, and I don't know that anybody else has that to the same degree, including Justin Jefferson, including Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb. He just that speed and explosiveness and acceleration just brings a different dynamic to every single snap he's on the field.
I agree, man. And that's why I keep coming back to Justin Jefferson's kind of like the easy one that people just lock into as the top wide receiver. But I mean, if you're really thinking about it, who strikes the most fear? I think that it's Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
It's just it's a speed that's uncoverable in so many ways. So
and it's not one-dimensional the way, some speedsters throughout history have been, where, okay, it's a vertical threat every single play, right? But it's not the same threat underneath. It's not the same kind of threat on a bubble screen or on a jet sweep or just on a shallow drag over the middle. Like Tyreek Hill's speed plays at all levels at all times. So everything he's doing is a threat. Like, it's not just a vertical threat that, we got to make sure we have a safety over the top. We got to make sure he doesn't run by us. Like, you also have to make sure that you have a guy like within, a yard of him when he catches the football anywhere, because I remember that Dallas play, right? The play against Dallas, right? Where Kansas City was like down, basically a Hail Mary attempt. And instead of a Hail Mary, they just gave the ball to Tyreek Hill, and he weaved through like 4 different defenders and housed it. Like, you can't do that with other receivers. It doesn't work.
He's special. I mean, like the speed is kind of like unlike anything that we've seen in a long time. I think Randy Moss is the right comparison, right? Just because when we talk about covering guys that are elite like that, we'll always use the phrase, you've got to get an extra set of eyes on him. Well, for players like Randy Moss or players like Calvin Johnson or Tyreek Hill, it's like, okay, well, it's not just an extra set of eyes. It's not just like the corner and then the safety also has to look at him. The entire defense has to. Like, you have to shift your entire defense to make sure that you're accounting for any place that Tyreek Hill can get the football. So that's whenever you're saying that kind of a phrase, that person has to be at the top or very close to the top of a wide receiver list.
Yeah, and it's like it's the different level of speed as well. Like, Randy Moss had the same type of thing where he had speed that made fast guys look slow. Like, there are plays on his tape where he just burns straight past a guy that runs like a 4.3 flat, right?
Right.
Tyreek Hill does the same thing. He's so fast that he makes fast people look slow. Like, the plays on his tape where the ones where he's not even carrying the football, but he like runs down a 4.4 running back to celebrate with him in the end zone. Like, takes 5 yards out of the guy over the course of the run just to celebrate. Like, he's not even going full burn. Those guys just have a different level of speed. Let's pivot to running back, because this is one that neither of us wrote, right? So the PFF.
I didn't write this one. Yeah.
The official PFF running back rankings. Christian McCaffrey, number 1. I think that will be fairly inarguable at this point. Derrick Henry, number 2. Jonathan Taylor, number 3. Nick Chubb, number 4. Bijan Robinson, number 5. Saquon Barkley, number 6. Breece Hall from the Jets, number 7. Aaron Jones, number 8, now the Minnesota Vikings. Jahmyr Gibbs, number 9. And Josh Jacobs, number 10. So what does your top 5 look like relative to this?
So I have CMC at number 1. I mean, McCaffrey at number 1, to me, again, like you said, like inarguable. I still have Derrick Henry at number 2. I think Derrick Henry had like quietly a great year last year. I don't think a lot of people really paid attention to Henry last year, just because the Titans really weren't making a lot of noise. A lot of headlines were, what Levis was doing with that team and, how it was up and down. So I think that Henry still had a fantastic year. I'm excited to see him in Baltimore. Jonathan Taylor, to me, a fully healthy Jonathan Taylor is still the number 3 back in the league. I had Bijan Robinson at number 4 because I'm really expecting a huge jump for Bijan this year. Like, I think that Bijan You look at what he did when he was at Texas, those 2 years that he was starting running back at Texas. I mean, they were unbelievable. They were so efficient. They were explosive. It was all there for him. He was a first down machine. He was making guys miss. He could give you explosive plays as well. He was fantastic in the receiving game. This is a little bit of a projection for me, but even from what I saw, the flashes of Bijan last year, like I think Bijan's about to have a massive 2024. And then I got Breece Hall at number 5. Again, Breece Hall is kind of the same thing. When he's been healthy and when he's been out there, he has been a super impactful part of what the New York Jets have been able to do. He's been every part of being that RB1 from his draft class. And I just think he's getting better the longer he's in the league. I thought Breece Hall was good. I didn't think that he was a phenomenal running back prospect, but he's even outplaying that, man. Like, he is a great running back in the NFL. I think he is also that next wave. And again, a fully healthy year from him, hopefully with Aaron Rodgers having a fully healthy year as well. The offensive line, you hope, is going to be better in New York too. So, but even with a subpar offensive line, Breece Hall was able to show you some magic over the last couple of years. So to me, his success level, where he's going, that trajectory, I got him at number 5. I would love to have Nick Chubb in this list because Nick Chubb, when he is fully healthy, has been one of the best backs in the NFL. How much wear and tear can the guy take? I mean, he's suffered 2 gruesome leg injuries now, one in college, and now he's coming off of one from Cleveland. So I would love to have him in this list. I don't know what we're getting coming off what looked like a terrible, terrible injury last year.
Yeah, that's the thing for Nick Chubb. Like, if the injury didn't happen, if you were just talking about a healthy Nick Chubb, he might be the best running back in the NFL. He'd certainly be up there with McCaffrey and Henry in that top 3. But his injury, the injury that he suffered, was so gruesome and devastating that we don't know what he is coming back at this point. Like, he might come back and look like the same guy, but it would be, I think, fairly unusual if he was able to. I mean, we're talking about guys, Jonathan Brooks fell in the draft because he suffered a relatively routine knee injury. Blake Corum fell in the draft because after coming back from a relatively minor knee injury, he didn't look like the same guy. Nick Chubb's entire knee, is in pieces or was in pieces, leg pointing in, the wrong direction. Like, you would assume the baseline expectation is that he's not going to look like the same guy, at least in year 1. So, I think you have to almost put him like an asterisk on his name off to the side somewhere and say, we don't know what he's going to look like yet. But healthy Nick Chubb is one of the best running backs in the NFL. I'm with you on Derrick Henry. I think he still showed, like, all that happened last year, and not just last year, but the last couple of years, is the Titans' offensive line became the worst offensive line in the NFL. So McCaffrey had like 300 more yards than Derrick Henry last year, but Henry actually had 1 more yard before contact, or yard after contact, rather. Like, he is still doing Derrick Henry things. It's just that the offensive line no longer functions the way it used to. So he doesn't, lead the league with 1,800 rushing yards and, all those kinds of things. He has to work harder for the yardage because the blocking stinks. Right. And I agree, Breece Hall is an absolute star. He's my number 3 running back. I think I might be most comfortable with him as the 3rd best guy at this point. The one other name I had in there in my top 5 that you didn't was Aaron Jones. You need healthy Aaron Jones, and that is a fair asterisk to put there, as he's not always healthy. But, man, when he's out there 100%, he's such a good running back. Like, a phenomenal just ball carrier, but also an amazing receiving weapon as well, better than a lot of the other guys on the list. I'm kind of excited to see what he does for the Vikings, and maybe they will give him more of a bell cow role, whereas Matt LaFleur likes to kind of split the workload in Green Bay.
I think he's incredibly efficient. Like, he is, to me, such a smooth runner. I feel like he's been underrated for a while. I think over the last 2 years, I would say, it feels like he's getting a little bit more public praise for just like how good he is when he is healthy. So we've heard his name a lot more, but I don't hate him in the top 5. I would have him probably top 10, not quite top 5, obviously doing this top 5 list here, but he'd be comfortably a top 10 back for me. So I could definitely understand you seeing something that you love from him and how efficient he has been at times when he has been out there. So I get it. I wouldn't have him in the top 5, but I get it.
All right. We want to hit offensive tackle, and then we'll move to some breakout candidates before. This is going to be a tight enough show today, short enough show, because we got to get Trevor out to the real big hitters of today. You know, Trevor has now expanded beyond the orbit of the PFF NFL podcast. Where are you going later, Trev? Where are you going to be appearing?
I'm on the Kay Adams show at 11:25, 11:30. So we're going right from this one to that one. So this is a nice little warm. I'm getting all my bad takes out on this show before I go on Kay.
That's what we're here for. Just remember the little people. You know, once you're a superstar, once you're there on all the big shows, remember that you were here on the PFF NFL podcast before all of that.
You can never forget it.
All right, offensive tackle rankings. The official PFF offensive tackle rankings. Number 1, Trent Williams, still cooking as the best tackle in the NFL. Number 2, Tristan Wirfs from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Number 3, Penei Sewell from the Detroit Lions. Number 4, Christian Darrisaw from the Minnesota Vikings. Number 5, Jordan Mailata, and then Lane Johnson at 6, both from the Eagles. Tyron Smith, number 7, now at the New York Jets. Laramie Tunsil, number 8, from the Houston Texans. Rashawn Slater, number 9, from the Chargers. And number 10, Colton Miller from the Las Vegas Raiders. So what does your top 5 look like?
So I have the same top 3 from this list. I have Trent Williams at 1. It's just until Trent Williams takes a serious dip, I don't know how you could not have him at number 1, because until he shows that, okay, he cannot keep up physically anymore. Not only is he a physical freak, but he is also now just smart, right? He's got so many years under his belt. He's seen it all. So it's the best of both worlds right now. And until he really takes a step back, I don't think you can put anybody else at number 1. And it's really saying something, because you've got 2, and even more than just 2, a handful of really great young offensive tackles who are ascending in the league. Tristan Wirfs proved that now he's not just a right tackle in the NFL. He could also play left tackle, splitting his time there over the last 2 years, playing really well, recording really good PFF grades while doing so. So I got Tristan Wirfs and his versatility and just his overall ceiling at number 2 on this list. Penei Sewell took a massive jump up this past year, was better as a pass protector, but was an elite run blocker. I mean, this dude, for what the Lions asked him to do, I mean, he is the perfect right tackle prospect for them. So Penei Sewell taking a jump into the elite category last year. I think that is only going to continue for him as one of the most talented offensive linemen in the NFL. I got Lane Johnson from Philadelphia, truly just out of respect for what this dude has been throughout his entire career and how he has continued to battle through injuries and yet stay one of the steadiest, most reliable offensive tackles in the NFL. So I got him at number 4. And then I was sort of torn between some of these younger guys like Jordan Mailata. I thought about him. I thought about Christian Darrisaw as well. Thought about putting Laramie Tunsil or Rashawn Slater in here. I ended up going with Andrew Thomas because Thomas had such an elite 2022 season. 2023 wasn't as strong, but he missed a lot of time for a hamstring injury. And anybody knows, when you seriously hurt your hamstring, it's not just, it's healed up, it's good to go. It's hard to go all out the way you need to as a football player throughout that entire season. So even though he was able to come back and he played fine, I think that the reasons why we didn't see that elite Andrew Thomas are more injury related than anything else. So I see that 2022 season as more of the true version of kind of who he is. And I think that if you take what he was in 2022, to me, that's OT5 on this list. So that's why I got Andrew Thomas here. And if he's fully healthy going into 2024, I think we're very quickly reminded of how good he is as an offensive tackle.
So we have the same top 5, but in a different order. My number 1 is Trent Williams, like everybody else. Number 2, I went with Lane Johnson. I think that Lane Johnson has one of the most difficult kind of assignments on a down-to-down basis of any tackle in the NFL. They completely leave him on an island and say, you're the best tackle out here. Go do your job. We trust you. You're going to do that gig. I think he's a better tackle than Jordan Mailata. The official PFF rankings had them flipped. I think Lane Johnson is significantly better than Mailata. They're both great, but I think he's the more proven commodity and the guy that they trust the most blocking anybody one-on-one. Tristan Wirfs is my number 3 guy. I agree with you. He's shown incredible versatility. He played right tackle, was as good as Lane Johnson almost at right tackle. He's basically the same guy on the left side as well. He's one of the best tackles, great in both pass blocking and run blocking. Andrew Thomas was my number 4. Agree with you. I think the season before last, he looked like arguably the best left tackle in the NFL, right up there with Trent Williams. Doesn't have Trent Williams' power, brute force, but nobody does. but he's an amazing pass blocker, really improved throughout his career. And then number 5, Penei Sewell. He's the guy that's closest to Trent Williams in terms of just pure power in the run game. Like what he can do to move people is crazy, and he's a really good pass blocker as well. So belongs in the top 5. And then the one guy from outside the top 5 that I would sort of make a case for but couldn't find a way to get him in there is Laramie Tunsil, who has just a pure like pass protecting left tackle, is probably as good as it gets. Like may even be better than Trent Williams. Doesn't have the same run blocking chops that some of these other guys do, but if like that's the thing you want, I just need the best pass blocker in the game on my left side, protect my quarterback. You're not going to get better than Laramie Tunsil.
Yeah, Tunsil was in this. When I was thinking about who was going to be 5 on this list, Tunsil was right there with, again, I thought about Mailata, I thought about Tunsil, I thought about Darisaw, ended up going Andrew Thomas, but I think Tunsil would have been next there to give him that recognition because he is very close to that.
Shout out to Colton Miller as well in the top 10 of the PFF rankings.
Yeah, man. Colton Miller is having like the quietest rise into being a top 10 offensive tackle in the NFL. Like nobody talks about Colton Miller, and I just think that he's been really good, obviously, as of late.
He's the one massive first round reach of the John Gruden draft era that worked, right? Like every single time they drafted a first rounder, it was a massive reach, and everyone was like, that's crazy, that's a terrible draft pick, including when they did it for Colton Miller. But he's the one guy that's actually worked out. It took a little bit of time, but now he's cooking. He's a top 10 player at that position, looks fantastic, and that was the one spot where, okay, they got it right that time. They reached for a guy. It seemed aggressive at the time, and he's become the player that they thought he was. Now they just, they got carried away and overdrafted everybody else from that point onwards, and those didn't work out. But that's the one that did.
Cleveland Farrell at 4.
Yeah, culture though changed massively. Real locker room guy.
I mean, it did eventually. Yeah, I mean, like the whole culture did actually change. But it's.
All right, let's wrap up the show with some breakout candidates for this upcoming year. Again, there's an article out there, 2 articles I think on PFF.com right now. Breakout candidates for all the NFC teams and for all the AFC teams. But I'm curious who your top 5 breakout candidates would be. Let's alternate. Let's go one each. We'll kind of give a little pitch for each guy, and then we'll wrap up the show.
All right, Quentin Johnston, come on, brother. Let's do it. Wide receiver 1 for the Chargers. He's going to be Herbert's go-to guy. Look, I would love to see Quentin Johnston break out, and I am not just saying this because I had him as a top 30 prospect when he was coming out, but because I do think that he is talented. Like, independent of me being right as a draft analyst, like, I think that he is a talented player. And even when you watch him at TCU, it felt like his game was incomplete. It felt like it was all flashes and there was not enough consistency. There was not enough dominance in one area to really hang your hat on. And maybe that ultimately becomes the story of why he might not work at the NFL level. He was sort of just this guy who could do a lot of different things for you. He had unique athletic ability for being taller, but he didn't really dominate the way he needed to with his tall receiver. He wasn't quite as fast as you needed him to be. He wasn't as strong as he needed to be at the catch point. Maybe that is the reason why he ultimately fails. But all of those things have showed up at one point, especially in his TCU tape. And so it's like, can we put that all together? Can he sort of surprise everybody at this point and have a massive breakout season this year? I don't know if I'd bet on it, but Sam, I'd like to see it. So that's why I wanted to bring him up first.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that there is the potential there. Like, I didn't like Quentin Johnston when I first turned to his tape. I was really low on him, and then because people like Mike Renner were like, "Nah, he's legit," and even you, top 30 player, right? There were enough people out there, and it wasn't the strongest draft class in the world, so it would have been it would have been easier to hate on it more if it was like this year, right? But a year ago, with the draft class that was there at the top, with other people really strong on him, I was like, okay, I can at least imagine this world where his strengths are played to and the stuff that he's good at works at the NFL level, right? He's able to catch those hitches, turn upfield, and run past people. I can imagine a world where that flies and you get, the same player in the NFL as you got in college. And by the way, and like an interesting wrinkle of this, Jim Harbaugh knows better than anybody what Quentin Johnston can do against a high-level NFL or high-level defense, right? Like his one of his best tapes in college was him just wrecking Michigan for a bunch of big plays when they played. So that'll be an interesting element of all this, is how does Harbaugh want to use him? But I can at least see a world where it works. Like, I get that there is a way of turning him into a good NFL player, but like the initial feels watching his tape weren't good. The NFL tape wasn't good so far. It's like they're starting to stack up the negatives on him. My first guy, Carl Brooks, defensive lineman now for the Green Bay Packers. I love this guy as a prospect a year ago. Weird prospect because he was like a 300-pound edge rusher. And immediately the Packers were like, okay, you're playing inside. That, you know, you're a 300-pound guy. You've got the body shape, body type of an interior player. He also had one of the worst workouts of all time in terms of statistical numbers.
Right.
But he was off the charts productive in college. And then obviously Green Bay took him after, I forget what round they drafted him in, but it was like way lower than Lucas Van Ness, who they took in the first round. And at the time, he was one of those guys where you look at the draft, and every year there's a player drafted, you know, rounds below another player at the same position that has a shot to be the better guy. And Carl Brooks was somebody that was like, don't be shocked if he's the better player than Lucas Van Ness. It certainly played that way year one. And if he continues developing the way we saw him as a rookie, dude, he could be phenomenal this year.
The Packers sort of draft these like unique multi-position, you know, interesting tweener weight type of defensive linemen, and they just like to be very multiple along their defensive front. So Carl Brooks always made sense to fit, and so it kind of makes sense that he would have a little bit of good play as a rookie, and you could expect him to have a little bit of a breakout here.
Just to illustrate what I was talking about as the workout numbers, right? So 6'3", 296, those are both solid numbers regardless of where you want to put them. Everything else except the bench press. So 28 reps on the bench press, that's good regardless of where you are. Everything else was below the 18th percentile, and several of them were in single digits. 20-yard shuttle was 5 seconds. That's in the first percentile. 5:08 40-yard time. We just, like, Darius Robinson was lambasted for running like a 4.95 or whatever, right? So he's like a tenth and a half slower than Darius Robinson in the 40. What else was catastrophic here? Vertical jump of 27 inches. That's awful. Fourth percentile. Like, one of the worst workouts I've ever seen, even if you say he's an interior guy, not an edge rusher. But he's just a damn good player.
And that's why he's a breakout candidate.
All right, who's your next guy?
Michael Mayer is my next guy. This is wide receiver up there. Obviously, he's a tight end. Had 300 yards last year as a rookie, receiving yards as a rookie. Michael Mayer probably hasn't had that few of receiving yards in a single year since, like, he was a seventh grader, right? Because you go back to his time at Notre Dame, even as a freshman, he had 450 receiving yards. He had 840 and 809 the next 2 years after that as more of a mainstay in their passing game. So, like, Mayer had his lowest production year, again, like probably since seventh grade, and like maybe even ever. Like, maybe he was dominating as a middle schooler as well. So I think we're in for a breakout just because of how productive this guy has been throughout his entire football journey. I understand that they drafted Brock Bowers, but I think a world can certainly exist where they're really emphasizing the tight ends in the passing game. And it's just sort of, time for him to break out. He was one of the best tight end prospects that we had in his class. He was one of the best tight ends in all of college football for 2 straight seasons. And it's not just, they drafted Brock Bowers. I guess they don't like Michael Mayer. He's going to be heavily involved in what they do in the passing game, on the line of scrimmage, as a slot receiver, that kind of stuff. So I think that we're in for a big sort of statement year and a breakout type of a year for Michael Mayer, even with Brock Bowers on the team.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't love Mayer as much as other people, but I was actually impressed by him in his rookie season, despite the numbers. My second guy, one of your favorites, Michael Wilson, the wide receiver from Arizona. I think
let's go, baby.
Now that he doesn't have to be their number one guy, now they've got Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson can just concentrate on being a really high-level number 2, a complementary piece. I think you're going to see this superstar emerge, like a guy that can be in the Devontae Smith world of Can he be an elite number one? I'm not sure. Maybe not, but does he need to be? No. And if he can just be that number two guy, like now with Kyler Murray at quarterback, I think you might see Michael Wilson absolutely cook this year.
I agree. I like Mike Wilson a lot. Was a big fan of his going into that draft cycle. Thought he killed it at the Senior Bowl. And I thought the only reason why he wasn't drafted higher is because of the injury history that he had when he was at Stanford. So I like this one a lot.
Nice. Who's your next guy?
Tyreek Stevenson is somebody who I was pretty high on in the draft class last year. Liked his landing spot in Chicago. I thought he was going to get an opportunity to start right away, and he did. And he played a lot last year, and he struggled. Guess what? Because it's really tough to play corner as a rookie. And so I think he kind of learned a lot of lessons last year with a lot of snaps under his belt. But there were stretches where he started to play really, really well. Obviously got the 4 interceptions. You see the overall grade there. The coverage grade's not so great, but I can genuinely believe that there is a big second-year jump coming from him. Okay, you bring Jalen Johnson back. You now got Tyreek Stevenson. It's not just, hey, let's target the rookie on the other side. He is somebody who his tape at Miami I liked a lot more than where his consensus draft position was. I thought he was really underrated in last year's class. So he is somebody who I think could have a really good breakout year this upcoming year because of the lessons he learned as a rookie, all that experience, and the talent level I feel like he has.
Yeah, I'm torn on this one because I really didn't like Tyreek Stevenson as a prospect, but I was actually surprised and impressed by him as a rookie. In particular, I didn't think he had a good feel for zone coverage at all in college, but that was actually his better area as a rookie. So much though I'm loath to admit it, I can definitely see Stevenson having a big year this year. My third guy, Will Mallory, tight end for the Indianapolis Colts. Guy that flashed on tape when I was watching him. Like, college production isn't there. Wasn't an awful lot in terms of like his profile. But at the combine, you just saw him move really well. He tested really well. And I thought we saw enough flashes of him as a rookie to be impressed, and maybe he can carve himself a role in that Colts tight end room, which is big on like athletic freak shows that haven't actually been that great in the NFL. So I could definitely see him becoming a bigger piece of that offense and making some noise. All right, we got a couple of minutes. Let's fire through your last two.
Okay, my last two, I have Diane Henley, who I think is going to have a chance to start at one of the linebacker spots for the Los Angeles Chargers. And I like it specifically because Jim Harbaugh, while he was at Michigan, he had like Junior Colson as the traditional like middle linebacker, bigger guy who could fit the run. But then whether it was Michael Bennett or a couple of other players who like have played that linebacker spot next to Junior Colson, they were always lighter, faster players. Like they were sometimes these like safety linebacker hybrids. And that's like what Diane Henley feels like. He is that faster, more athletic linebacker. You saw him be able to do that at Washington State. And I think that if anybody has a really good plan for how to use maybe an undersized, more speed-oriented linebacker, it's Harbaugh, because he had an exact position for that on the Michigan Wolverines defense. So I think that Henley is in for a breakout year this year as a starting linebacker for them. And then the last guy is David Ojabo. I'm going to pick a Michigan guy here because Ojabo is somebody who had a really high talent ceiling when he was coming out in his class, ended up tearing his Achilles during a workout during the draft cycle. So he really didn't get to see him much his rookie season. Last year, I think he dealt with ankle injuries, if I'm remembering correctly. So really still have not seen this guy fully healthy yet. I am really hoping that he's able to come back this year, play a majority, if not all of the season. I would love to see that from him. And if we do, I think that, he's acclimated to NFL life. He gets it. He's going to be able to pin his ears back a little bit. So Ojabo is somebody who I think people are forgetting about. But certainly with Jadeveon Clowney gone, with Kyle Minoy gone, like there are snaps to be had at that edge spot for Baltimore. And I think Ojabo is going to take one of them.
I like it. Number 4 for me, Boye Mafe for the Seahawks. I think that new defensive scheme is going to unlock a lot of those defensive players. And I actually think Mafe's really been impressing anyway. Like he looks like a guy that's on the rise, turning into a really disruptive edge rusher. I think within that new defensive scheme there in Seattle, you're going to see him really break out. And then the last guy, Leo Chenal, the linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs. Willie Gay's moved on. I think Chenal is going to have a much bigger part of that defense. And he's like the opposite of Carl Brooks we talked about before, where instead of having the worst possible workout numbers, almost everything Chenal did in the workouts is in like the 99th percentile, right? 6'3", 250-pound linebacker who ran a 4.53 with a 1.50 10-yard split, a 41-inch vertical, 34 bench reps, a 3.94 short shuttle time, and a 6.84 three-cone time. This guy is an athletic freak show who's played pretty well in limited snaps in the NFL so far. So
He's
breakout
awesome. He's
season
awesome.
incoming for Leo.
I agree
Nice.
wholeheartedly.
All right.
Like Leo Chanel call out.
We'll let you get off to your much more impressive TV appearance there, Trevor. What are you on? 11:30? Is that when you're
11:25, 11:30, one of those times.
All right, so you guys have got 10 minutes. You can go make yourself a coffee, make yourself a drink, get yourself a sandwich, whatever you want to do, and then fire up the Kay Adams Show and hit Trevor on that as well. Trev, thank you very much for showing up to the PFF NFL podcast. Thank you all for watching and listening. Myself and Steve will be back on Monday. We will talk to you then.